You're constantly reclaiming your rise. It's not a one and done. You're always reinventing yourself and reinventing your approach to disease management.
Welcome to the Reclaim Your Rise podcast. My name is Lauren Bongiorno, nationally board certified health coach and founder and CEO of Risely Health, where we help people and families impacted by type 1 diabetes take ownership over their lives so that they can transform with more freedom and confidence. Everyone has a different reason to be here. You might be seeking knowledge, support, or community, but at your core, I know that you long for something deeper. You're here for transformation. And that's what the Reclaim Your Rise podcast is all about. A quick reminder before we start the show that nothing you hear on the Reclaim Your Rise podcast should be a substitute for personalized professional medical advice. Please always consult your physician or other medical professional before making any changes to your diet, insulin dosages, or healthcare plan. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Reclaim Your Rise. So if you're a parent of a child with diabetes, especially if they're recently diagnosed, you are going to get a lot out of this episode. My guest today is Erin Baldauf, who is a mom to 4 children and whose youngest was diagnosed with T1D 10 years ago, just at 15 months old. Erin is a lifelong learner and holds a Ph.D. in literacy education, as well as being an internationally board certified lactation consultant. After her son's diagnosis, Erin merged her passions of writing, being a mother, and the commitment to really helping parents advocate for themselves and their children by authoring multiple books surrounding diabetes. The first was an adult nonfiction called 10 Tiny Fingers, 10 Tiny Toes that is based on interviews with 8 mothers raising children with type 1. And her second project was a children's fiction series called The Sugar Chronicles. In this episode, Erin and I discuss breastfeeding a child with type 1, how to give yourself more grace when you make a diabetes dosing mistake, the debate of whether to wake your kid up or not when they are sleeping and have a high or low blood sugar, and the ins and outs of sending your child to diabetes camp for the first time. Okay, without further ado, help me welcome my guest, Erin, to the show, and let's rise. Erin, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
It's going to be a great conversation, and I want to dive in right away because we have a lot to get to. So, on every podcast episode, the way we start is by asking our signature question. So, do you have a story that comes to mind that you can share about a time that you reclaimed your rise as a parent of a child with type 1 diabetes?
I do, and I'll share in a second, but I think most parents of type 1s who've been doing it for a while, this is our 10th year, will tell you you're constantly reclaiming your rise. It's not a one and done. You're always reinventing yourself and reinventing your approach to disease management. But the first time, so I would have to say, was when my son was first diagnosed. He was 15 months old, and he was still exclusively nursing. And at the time, I guess that's abnormal in this country, 15 months, still mostly nursing. And I thought, he's the youngest of 4. My other kids had nursed for a while, but they were onto solid foods at that point. And it seemed a little bit like, gosh, when is this kid going to transition to food or something? Now, in hindsight, I wonder if that was kind of him buffering the foods of the outside world, as his pancreas started to shut down and his body started to change. He couldn't handle certain things. That's my non-scientific theory. But at the time, I had just finished my IBCLC certification requirements. So here I was out there supporting other women, doing lactation courses, advocating for women in all different kinds of ways who were facing challenges to breastfeeding. And I find myself in the hospital with this little guy who doesn't want to eat, who only wants to nurse. And that was my major comfort, my tool in my tool bag for comforting him. And he's in DKA. And I mean, just the images that come to mind of as his body shut down, and they're telling me, no, you can't nurse him. That's not something, we can't monitor that. We can't do any of these things. That was in the first hospital. We transitioned to Children's Hospital. And again, in the PICU, we faced some challenges and I was very concerned. But I found this really awesome nutritionist who said, I heard through the grapevine, you're trying to nurse your son and nobody's letting you. So she closes the curtain and she's like, listen, we're going to figure this out. She was from the endocrinology ward, but upstairs she says, I have practiced extended nursing. I'm a big proponent of nursing in general and also comforting a child who's going through this. I'm going to help you. We're going to talk strategy, but first let's get that baby back on the breast because he needs to nurse. And it was like this really just incredible moment. So time goes by and I was really frustrated by the experience, but we found our groove and I said, I can't let women go through this. It's just not right. So I started writing an article and about 6 months after we got out of the hospital, I published that article on the Kelly Mom site. And I started getting lots of feedback from women who were saying, oh my gosh, like everyone was telling me I couldn't nurse. They were trying to strip that from me. And the feedback, like I get chills just thinking about it.
Mm,
Um, you saved me. You saved our nursing relationship. You like just um, the feedback was overwhelming. And so I said, wow, I wonder if I can. So that was like the first reclaim, right? And me not only doing something to help my son and help our relationship, but help other people. And so then I reached out to some women in the different boards I was on and said, would anyone be interested in sharing their story? I'd love to know what others are doing and is anyone being supported or is this just like the black hole of type 1 management? And it was really someone were saying, yeah, I found wonderful endocrinologists and they're really supportive and others who weren't. That turned into a 9-year project of interviews. And just again, the relationships that were built through that and learning from other women what they've done uh, to kind of take charge and to advocate for themselves and their kids and being a part of that. I think it's it's me taking this challenge of having a child with type 1 and using it as a tool to help others. And I think that's the
mm.
reclaim.
That's beautiful, and you can tell that this is who you are as a person, not just something that came about when your son was diagnosed 10 years ago. So, what do we have to know about you and your background to understand your passion for really helping parents of T1D kids advocate for themselves and their children? Because that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing a lot of you need to advocate for yourself and you need to if your intuition is calling you to, for example, continuing to breastfeed, or if it's calling you to not go follow the advice of whatever that person or medical professional told you, that is what I'm getting from this. So, and it is really important and what we talk a lot about here on the show. So tell me, what do we have to understand about you to understand how you got there?
Yeah, I think you nailed it, right? Because most parents are not coming from a medical background. And so they're thrown into this whole new world where literally they're being thrown out the door and kind of given like this nursing status, right? You're going to care for this child, whatever age they are. You're going to be responsible for measuring these fine little
Mm,
micro doses in a syringe. It's terrifying. And I've heard even from nurses who are like, yeah, it's one thing to be in the hospital and take care of other people, and then to have this amazing responsibility on your shoulders. But especially for parents who don't have a medical background, it can be overwhelming.
mhm,
And so I think that's been the drive all along. I guess I would describe myself as a little headstrong, for lack of a better way to say it. My girls are the same. My daughters, my non T1 daughters, are the same. And as much as that can cause me angst sometimes, it's a celebration I do inside my mind every day. Like, no one's going to beat you down, right? But it can be hard to find that, especially when you're trying to find your way in this unknown world and you don't have the medical expertise and you don't know if what the doctors are saying is it's all based in medical science. And I'm not trying to say that a doctor's trying to lead you astray, but everyone comes to these situations through their own lens and through their own
mhm,
experiences, right? And so I think what I've consistently said to parents over and over again is if you can build that relationship with your endo team, that it's about mutual respect and that they look at you and they say, hey, you're the front person. You're the ones doing the work every day. You're the ones who manage it through the night, through the sicknesses, through the changes in weather, through all of the things that we know impact blood sugar without judgment. You have yourself a good team. if you find that endo team that's really micromanaging, and you must call us for every dose change, and you must call us for every sneeze and sniffle, it's not that easy. I know there are a lot of places where we have endocrinology deserts and there's not access to, second and third opinions. I get that, but I'm always trying to, I guess, encourage people to just own their role in it as a professional, as someone who knows what they're doing, even if they didn't go to medical school, who deserves the respect of the other people who are working with their child. Um, it shouldn't be a battle of wills. And I
Mm,
think, again, that's so asking me, like you did before, where I come from and who I am as a person. I guess I've always had this sense that I know I'm a professional and I know that I carry myself as a professional. Um, but that's easy for me to say. I have more degrees than I should, and I way too much in student loans. So, I'm a chronic learner. And so for me, I'm always like, okay, I guess it gives me confidence. There are a lot of people who might not have that confidence. That doesn't mean they don't deserve respect. It doesn't mean that they don't know their child. It doesn't mean that they're not worthy of being treated like an adult and a professional by the people on their team.
mm,
And you mentioned when we were talking earlier about a family member who's a special education teacher. I think that's really what serves me well, is that in my role as a special education teacher and running the special education department for an elementary school, what I always told parents was, you are the team. This is not an us versus you. This is not somebody knows better than someone else. Without the parents' insights and personal knowledge of that child, the team goes nowhere.
mhm.
And I think just all of those experiences kind of come and filter or, bond together.
Absolutely. And you said a lot of important things there. One thing I want to reflect back at, or two things. The first one is, when you have a child that's first diagnosed, you don't know anything, and the doctors, their team, know way more about you, more than likely, right? About your child's type 1 diabetes, and they're the people that you're going to gain the initial foundational information from. But
Hmm.
from that second on, you are going to spend way more time with your child and are surrounded by diabetes than that doctor, is going to. And so you have the power to learn so much about their body's patterns and what works and what doesn't work, and figure it out as a team along the way. And so you take, let's say, you who has had a child for 10 years, if you take somebody tomorrow who's just, their child's just diagnosed, you can tell them all you want, like, it's going to get better, and like, I know it
Yeah.
feels overwhelming now, but it's like, it's going to be okay. And like, you get to this other side, but for them, it feels like they're at war. It's like
Yeah.
my going into mama mode, like protection mode, like mama bear. And just like, my child, who I thought would be, I had this vision for a healthy life, is now compromised. And what does this look like? And so,
Yeah.
that leads me to the second thing that I'm hearing from you, and also want to add on to, which is, as much as this is a child's journey that has impacted their life with type 1 diabetes, it's just as much the parent and
Yeah.
their own journey separate from the
Yes.
child.
Yes.
And I want to talk a little bit about that, because that comes up a lot. We coach, many parents, and but by nature, how it happens is a lot of moms end up, doing coaching with us. Some fathers and partners will join as well, but it's primarily, I would say, 80% of the time, the mom that we're working with, if their child is younger. And what we notice is that they come in with wanting, their child to have more predictable numbers, and they want, them to be able to eat, this food on the fly, and going to soccer practice, and all of these things. And what happens throughout the program is that they realize that the coaching serves them as the caregiver, because they didn't realize how emotionally suppressed they have been, because they're constantly putting their child first, and not even paying attention to, like, how is this impacting, like, my life's journey.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to add on to that. I see you shaking your head and nodding your head in agreement. But
Yeah.
what comes to mind when you hear that?
So I'm almost going to spin a little bit of what you said, but because parents do find it very difficult to put their needs first, their emotions and their own need for comfort, they have a tough time prioritizing that. And I think if parents can realize that in doing so, they're actually serving their child, it will help. And what I mean by that is we
Mm.
get very hard on ourselves. We want to make it easier for our children. We don't, we want to calculate everything perfectly so that they have smooth numbers, so they don't feel bad, so they can show up to soccer practice or whatever it is. But then we put so much on ourselves and we're so hard on ourselves. And what we're doing is modeling for the child that when you do something wrong or it's not a perfect calculation, the correct response is get angry. The correct response is call yourself stupid or get down on yourself for not being perfect at this science, right? And somebody somewhere along the way said to me, you know, if you make a mistake and then your response is, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I can't believe I screwed this up, how did I do this so wrong? You're modeling for them what they're going to do themselves down the road when they take ownership of
Mhm.
disease management, right?
Mhm.
If on the other hand you can show them, you know what, this is not a perfect science, and one day it will be different than the other. Sometimes I'm going to make a mistake and you know do something wrong. Some of the stories that came through when I interviewed moms for that book, they were significant quote unquote mistakes, things that someone outside of the world of type 1 management would say, oh my God, how could you do that? For example, one of the women I interviewed, she has 2 kids. She drew up the wrong amount and gave the wrong dosing to the wrong child. Like, and you're
Mm.
thinking, in a medical situation, in a hospital, you would never give insulin without someone else being there, right? The nurse comes in, the nurse does a measurement, they have another backup nurse, they're always checking each other. That's the wonderful thing about a hospital. We don't have that,
Mhm.
right? Our homes do not have the benefit of a backup. We're constantly making decisions, a lot of times sleep deprived, overexhausted, not having eaten, not having taken care of ourselves. And now we're making these decisions and mistakes get made. And that's when we have to remind ourselves that the way I respond to this mistake is critical. The grace I show myself, the compassion I show myself is the compassion and grace that my child will show themselves down the road.
Mhm.
And when that mistake happens, I've got to take a step back and say, you know what, buddy? I made a mistake. And we have to figure out how to fix this mistake. It's not the end of the world. There's a way to fix all mistakes as long as we kind of keep our cool, right? And not for word, but these are the things that we have to show them,
Mhm.
so that they have those tools of compassion and and kind of reset when they go out into the world on their own.
Right. And also, it's when you're not doing that, I like to think of it as everybody has this emotional or energetic container that we walk around with. When you go to sleep, right, you wake up in the morning and it's fresh and you have a certain capacity. And when you add up all of those, things that are happening, it's not the things that are often spilling us over of our emotional capacity container. It's often how we're responding to them because we're getting ourselves all worked up and we're getting ourselves all
Mhm.
upset. And that over time is exhausting. And so it's not always the diabetes that feels, draining in itself. It's the bouncing back and forth between, okay, we're doing really good, oh my gosh, like how did I miss that, and now this is happening and now I'm doing really bad, and even just using language like good and bad. So
Yes.
what, along the way, did you feel that parents in the series that you interviewed, including even yourself too, like what do you feel helped them get past that point of being very critical, very judgmental of themselves, or just living with more, harmony with diabetes that
Hmm.
maybe could be good for, somebody, a parent who has a newly diagnosed child to hear?
Yeah. I think it's that sense of community that's critical. So, I'm always telling moms, go find yourself a support group, whether it's virtual or not, so that you can be around other people who, we talk about normalizing diabetes for kids, type 1 camps or play groups or whatever it is, but parents too benefit from that because when they hear, "Oh my gosh, you did that? Wow, okay, maybe my screw up wasn't so bad," or, "Yeah, my screw up was bad and we fixed it because whatever." Um, when we see that others struggle too, then it makes our struggle, well, feel more valid, but also more normal and acceptable, right? We're not living out here in some universe that no one else is experiencing. And I guess, it's why I make it my mission to just tell everyone I run into, like, give yourself grace, take care of yourself, be kind to yourself, and then also find those groups. I'm on Facebook, not because I like to sit there and read Facebook feeds, but it's one of the best sources I found for online support groups.
Mm.
So I'm like a support group junkie. I've got support. I've got probably about 5 or 6 different diabetes related support groups. My husband has RA. I'm in RA support groups. I'm in like anxiety management support groups for kids, teacher support groups. I'm like literally the support group junkie. So I'm always telling people, find that group that can help you feel supported, where you can ask your questions in a non-judgmental way. um, Especially now, like 20, it's midnight, it's 2 in the morning, and you're struggling and you can't figure out why the kid keeps crashing, or why the kid's 400 and not responding to insulin. There's somebody awake, there's someone there who can help you work through it, and that's huge.
This episode is brought to you by Omnipod. Many people don't know this, which is why we've partnered with Omnipod to help spread the word. But did you know that if you're curious about trying the Omnipod 5 tubeless wearable system, you can do so with no commitment, no obligation, and even if your current pump is in warranty? Crazy, right? Omnipod truly wants to make it as easy as possible for you to test our new system out and see how great life can be with it. There are so many benefits, my 2 highlights being that the activity feature sets a temporary higher target for times where less insulin is needed, and it integrates with Dexcom G6 to automatically adjust insulin every 5 minutes. So if you want to get on a pump for the first time, or if you want to have more freedom without a tubed pump, you can see if you're eligible for a free trial by going to omnipod.com/rise. Fill out the quick form and they'll do the work to check insurance coverage for you. You can also view full safety information, instructions for use, and trial terms and conditions at omnipod.com/rise. Now, right back to the show. Yeah, the community aspect is so impactful, and we live in a time where there's so much accessibility to that. And I know I was diagnosed when I was 7 years old. And so there wasn't that for my family. There was like in-person JDRF meetings, and that was, and Diabetes Research Institute Foundation that we got involved with, but that was like the extent of it. Other than a few just like one-off relationships that my parents had. But I can imagine that their journey would have felt a lot less lonely if that were the case now. But, in addition to the series that you dedicated so much time to writing and following all the families that you interviewed, you also wrote a children's series. I know it's like ages 9 to 14, I think is a sweet spot. It's called the Sugar Squad Chronicles.
Mhm.
With a PhD that you have in literacy education, like how did you get to that point where you're like, I'm gonna, write this children's book series?
I think what I guess this would go kind of an answer to your last question too. For so long, I was prioritizing my career, my education, which as a teacher, kind of, my work and my education were going hand in hand, and I was pouring so much time and energy into that. I was writing so much, but a lot of it was academic in nature. I was reading a
Mm,
lot that was academic in nature, and what I realized was that I stopped doing the one thing I loved doing, which was creative writing. I happened to have a master's in creative writing, but I wasn't doing any of that. And so, just like someone who loves cooking or painting or gardening or whatever, I finally gave myself permission, going back to what you said, to take care of my soul and my needs, right? I
mm,
don't love cooking, especially with all the needs in this family. Like everyone's got a different need. So cooking is a source of anxiety for me. So that wouldn't be my go-to. But I said, I really need to start writing for fun again and take a break from all of the academic stuff. And I married that with my love for reading with my 11-year-old. And he just turned 11 this week. So, but we read every night, and I really wanted to do something kind of with him and celebrate, what we live through every single day in a way where I could also still fuel my passion. Like I had to
mm,
I had to figure out a way to make all the pieces fit, right? Because there's only so many hours in the day, because I do work full time and I am mothering. And as we all know, the phone calls to the doctors and the medical professionals and the insurance companies, all of those things take hours out of your day. How do you make them all fit? So I was like, ooh, I could write a series, or I could write a book. I think I started with one book idea about diabetes and about, my kid's experience that I can read with him. And so he gives me feedback, and it's so funny because the main character is this little blonde boy who's kind of modeled after my son. And I'll have him do things as writers with parents do. They'll take experiences from their own kids' lives and they'll kind of feed them in. And so there's this one scene where the main character is eating this great pizza that he made, that it happens to also be gluten free because he also has celiac, like my son.
Mm.
But he loads it up with all different kinds of colorful vegetables and everything else. And my son turns to me and says, "You made me like vegetables? How could you do?"
He's like, that's not factual.
Yeah. He's like, "You can't do that. You can't make me." So he's obviously identified with the character in the book, which I love and is a lot of
Oh.
fun. And so the main character has an older brother who I've also kind of modeled after my older son, who's been just a major sense of support for me and for his younger brother. The only times when I've been able to get away with my husband overnight is when my now 17-year-old is home. My parents were always amazing, taking care of him during the day, but nighttime management is way different, right? Anyone who's cared for a kid who does not wake up to alarms knows that caring for a kid with type 1 at night is a whole different ballgame.
Mm.
And my 17-year-old has been amazing. And so we haven't done it much, but we got away a couple times at night. And it was his older brother who was managing the nighttime diabetes control. So he features in there too. And there'll be times like, and so my older son is in an auto program in Denver right now. So we'll be going to Denver in the next book. And he's in auto school. So we've talked about that, and they kind of build a go-kart together. So it's kind of fun building in the family dynamics into the series.
So interesting that you brought that up about your child not waking up to alarms, because there's a bunch of different, just stories of how I would say parents deal with that. There are some people who have actually shared, hey, like when I stopped waking them up and said, like, all right, this is on you now, when it's like that transitional age, like into high school, they just magically started waking up to their alarms, right? Because they, or when they were sleeping over a friend's house, they could wake up to the alarms, but when they're home, suddenly they can't hear the alarms anymore, right? There's things like
Right.
that. Then there's also, kids who really, like, no matter the condition, they can't wake up to the alarms. And there are products on the market now I've even seen that are more light oriented, where it's
Mhm.
a colorful ball. I don't know where they are in their manufacturing, but I was introduced to them really like just when they were starting launching the product. But it's a light that gets brighter and brighter and brighter to try to wake them up and like model the sunlight almost in the
Mhm.
room. But what have you found other than your, I guess, like you waking him up or your oldest son waking him up? Like, what do you do when he has sleepovers, or maybe he doesn't have sleepovers? Like, I'm just curious what your, outside of that method is.
So I will admit I was living with a lot of mom guilt because I have not been waking him up. And so he went to diabetes camp for the first time this summer. And I
Mm.
asked the woman there who was doing all the intake, I said, "I have to admit, I don't wake him up, so he's not really ready to be independent at night." She's like, "Oh, most of these kids don't wake up at night. Don't even worry about it." I was like, "Oh, thank goodness." And that's what I mean about that sense of community, right? Where you realize, "Oh, maybe I'm not that abnormal." We just like to label ourselves that way. But she said, if they wake up, they wake up. But we also understand at this age, that 9, 10, 11 age, they're so tired. They're doing so much during the day. They really need to sleep. We don't force it. When they get into the teenage years, then you can start to work on that a little bit more. And I probably will have a struggle on my hands. I mean, this kid has been diabetic since 1 year old. And he, now it's kind of, I'm just remembering last night he got a little bit low and I went to give him a glucose tab and he woke up with his elbow like this and clocked me right in the nose.
Oh
Luckily,
my
I don't,
gosh.
has no recollection of this whatsoever.
Of course not. Of course not. I remember being a kid, and one time my mom came in with orange juice, and I got startled, and orange juice went flying all over the sheets and the bed. And my mom's just like, "Oh my gosh!" And I then finally woke up. I was like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" She's like, what's wrong? And, she has compassion, obviously, but is
Yeah.
pissed that there's orange juice all over. So it
That's why
happens.
I don't like things like this do not go in a bedroom at nighttime
Yeah,
because
not smart.
no. So it's either if there's a juice box with a straw or sometimes
Hmm.
it's a glucose tab or something that I can just, control a little better. But yeah, I'm not looking for orange juice all over my floor any more than anybody
Yeah,
else.
I think that was the first and last time, or last time my mom did that.
Yeah, but
Um,
I think I'm just kind of waiting. I feel like he doesn't get enough sleep to begin with, especially we just moved
mhm.
and we're coming from a place where my husband was 6 hours away from us time zone wise until last week. He'd still be calling at 10 o'clock at night. My oldest daughter's in California. I've got the son in Denver. It's like everyone's on different time zones. So he can sometimes get phone calls, be on the phone till 10 o'clock at night. He's got to get up at 6 in the morning for the bus.
Hmm.
The thought of, lights that wake him up and mirror this, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like this poor kid needs to function, right? So I'm just going to keep carrying the burden. That's just my choice.
Yeah.
And I know there are parents who start at 8, 9 years old having their kids wake up at night, and that's a choice too. I think at the end of the day, you really have to do what works best for your family. That's my
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah. And so when you're low, you go in and treat it for him. And then when he's high, do you wake him up to give him a correction, or what, you go in and correct him
Yeah.
on his
And I
low?
mean, now he is on a closed loop pump, which
Hmm.
I feel like that's kind of
It's better.
it's better, but it's not, it's not a cure. So sometimes it works nicely. I think about a week ago, I actually slept for 8 straight hours. I haven't done that in years. And then it never happened again. So
Oh no.
yeah, but for the most part, I find that, I'll have to give a little bit of a correction. Um, I don't wake him up for that.
Hmm.
I have a tough enough time getting him up at 6 to make the bus. So
Yeah, and that's amazing that you feel so strong and like that's what works for him. And I want to say my parents, I woke up a lot from my lows. I felt them and would be woken
mm,
up if I was lower than, I would say, like 60 as a kid, and I still do today.
mm,
But a lot of the highs, I was woken up, and also we didn't have Dexcoms when I was younger, 23
yeah,
years ago. So my mom would finger prick every single night at 12 o'clock, and I think she'd get up at 3 a.m. for about,
mm,
I think, like 6 years straight. She did it
yeah,
every single night. So it is a lot of a burden on you, but it's amazing when you do get to that point where they go off to college, because then it really is okay. Now you're entering the adult world, and
yeah,
you may live under my roof in the future, but you may also not. And so this is your thing to carry, and I've gotten you as far as I could possibly get you. So,
yeah.
on the diabetes camp note, what do you feel comfortable sharing what camp you went to?
Sure. Um, I think the official name is until until there's a cure. I
Okay.
think okay. Um, and I'm thinking like right in the next room is this big T-shirt and tie-dye that's stuck to his wall that he loves. He had such a blast. I think it's Camp Until a Cure. I think
Camp
that's
until
the
a
name.
cure. Okay.
And it's just outside of Indianapolis. It's a smaller camp. I know there are some bigger ones in other places. This was our first time. We had a very big, busy summer with the move and everything. He absolutely loved it. He can't wait to go back again. Um, and I'm kind of hoping that that's our transition. Like this year is actually his first year managing during the school day on his own. So
Mm,
in Hawaii, where we came from, they don't do school nurses like they do in most other states. You have a one-to-one nurse. Sometimes it'll be, like a one-to-two nurse or something. They share a nurse with someone else. But since 3 years old in preschool, he's had a nurse with him every day. So that's another reason why I'm like, you know what, right now, this is a big enough nut to crack for him where he's managing the daytime stuff. If he does that for a full year through fifth grade and we get to summer, he's a little older, he's managed for a year daytime, maybe that's when we start. He'll be approaching 12 years old. He'll be in that camp context. I'm hoping maybe then we'll start to tackle the night times too. And he did, he said at night, they would, if a kid needed to go to the bathroom or something, they'd have a buddy system because it's dark out there. So they
mhm.
tell the kids, pick a buddy to go with you. And so he was actually getting woken up at night because apparently he was the favorite buddy. So a
Oh.
lot of times, even if he didn't need to wake up, he would just, come on, Connor, come with me. I got to go to the bathroom. So
Oh.
he obviously did respond to being woken up at night. And I think because you're in this context of like, everyone around me has this, we're all kind of doing this game together. it didn't feel quite so burdensome as much as like,
Mm.
yeah, we're learning and growing together. So I think if you can get your kid into a camp, whether it's 1 week, I know there's, 3 and 4 weeks, but even that 1 week experience for them, it's pretty surreal when you show up for the first time and you're walking in and everybody's like pinging and alarming and everything. And you're like, wait, like, are you high? Are you, what's going on? And then you realize, no, it's like the kid standing next to me is high. The other one's low. The other one's like, pump is expiring and buzzing. And it's incredible. But then you also realize why they set everything so differently. So they turn the high alerts to 300 and you're like,
Mm.
oh, how am
You're
I
like,
going to leave you here?
no, no. So everybody they don't have a choice. It has to be 300.
Yeah, because they're like, it would be like this all day. We'd never be able to do anything.
It's true. It's
Yeah.
true. Oh man. So I'm just out of curiosity, no judgment at all. We don't have any judgment here on in this space of the podcast world, but were his numbers like did he come back even like low like crazier numbers that week while he was there? Were they better
It
because he was
wasn't
around other people? Out
I
of
couldn't
curiosity.
watch. So that's another thing is they make you turn it off.
Oh my God,
So
they're really pulling the plug there.
yes, you're like, "Okay, I'll survive, I'll survive." Um, it was great for both of us, but they have doctors, they have medically trained staff, they have a lot of the, counselors have diabetes themselves.
Hmm.
It really is a community of people who are there to keep everyone safe, but to also have fun. Um, so I really just trusted he was in good hands, and I believe he was. Were his numbers, I think, because you can look at some of the history and stuff like that. His numbers ran a little higher than normal, but I don't think it was outrageous. And I think for a week to have that experience, I don't think it's going to do, from everything I've learned and been told, we're not doing long term damage with a week of slightly higher numbers. In time, if as they get older and they're a little better at managing, they can kind of tweak a little bit more
Hmm.
routinely, but for the younger ones, they're probably gonna have some higher numbers, and that's just something for parents to know going in.
And the fact that you got a break from Dexcom Share, I mean, that is just the best gift that you probably were not looking at your phone as much,
Yep.
not, getting so much just interruption from your daily, just
Mm,
activities and work and whatnot. My last question for you, Erin, is let's say you have somebody right now listening whose child was newly diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and they're in that phase of like feeling lost and feeling, I would say, what we hear a lot is like how bad they feel that their child has to live with this for the rest of their life
mm,
and that they have this burden and that they can never really be super super carefree. Like what would you say to them in order to help them, I don't want to say like rid themselves of those feelings, but just make more peace with it?
yeah. Well, I will tell you when my son was diagnosed, we went into this with a lot of fear. My cousin, who was the only person with type 1 I had ever known in my life directly, she died the month before he was diagnosed, and she was young, she was in her 40s.
Mm,
And she had struggled with complications. And like you said, I mean, technology was so different when she was younger. There was no Dexcom. It was pee on a stick, it was sharpened needles and all of that stuff. Her life and my aunt who took care of her all those years, they didn't have the tools, and it it, it wasn't so easy to feel good, and I think what I finally was able to embrace was, although the technology is not perfect, as although we don't have a cure, you really can feel good. You can feel healthy on a regular basis if you say, okay, I'm not going to let this thing beat me down. It's going to take time. I'm going to have to figure this out. But if you're a grown up, you've figured other things out, right? You learned how to drive a car. If you're a mother, you've learned how to deliver a baby. Like, you've figured out other tough stuff. This is going to be tough. It will be hard. Find those support networks. Find the online groups where you can ask questions without judgment, where people are desperate to give you information and happy to give you support and love. Find those places early.
mm,
Um, And then no, you're going to struggle. And again, if you can, find the endocrinologist that lifts you up. So one of the things that the endocrinologist told us when we were leaving the hospital, he says, I just want you to know there is no problem you can't fix as long as you just keep your head. And the story he told us was about this one family years ago who the kid had a pump and got into the pump belt and gave himself some ridiculous amount of insulin because they
Mm,
didn't have it capped. And after a while of pumping, you learn like, okay, we're never going to need more than 8 units at a time. So,
right.
or 2 units at a time, wherever you're at that time in life. So cap it at that so that there can't be an accident. But there was no cap. And the kid gave himself something ridiculous, like, 100 units or something really scary. And he said, the parents were freaking out, and rightfully so. But then I explained to them what's in your pump is a fast acting insulin. It has a short life, so it will go away. We need to keep giving sugar. We need to take care of it. I'm glad you called me so we can talk through this the right way. Don't run from your mistakes, obviously, right? But we'll be okay. And I know a woman, her son was diagnosed right around the same time as my son. They both went through the Hawaii school system together, got those one-to-one nurses at the same time. She had a nurse who was used to using the pump for her son. Pump wasn't working. The nurse gave a full syringe worth of insulin
Oh
because
gosh.
she got confused about whatever it was, like 3 units instead of 30 units. It happened.
Mm-hmm.
The kid went to the hospital and but they fixed it. They fixed it because
Right.
they acted quickly. That's what you need to know. Every mistake can be fixed. You will make mistakes. You will make lots of mistakes. Every mistake can be fixed. Get on the phone with a doctor, a professional. If it's a really big mistake, reach out to other people who've been there so they can make you feel better and let you know that they've made mistakes too. Give yourself lots of grace and lots of compassion because it's hard. It's really
Mm-hmm.
hard.
That's great advice. I think those scary stories are they can scare you into being fearful to make a mistake, but you could also look at them and say, "Oh wow, that crazy thing happened and they made it out of it." That's
Yep.
what makes me feel, so certain that in any situation I can, figure it out. I've been in the middle of the Costa Rica rainforest, 7 hours away from a pharmacy with
I love it.
a waterlogged, insulin meter and a broken pump and expired insulin pens. Like I figured it out, right? So everything's figure outable. And I love that advice. So thank you so much for
You're just
sharing.
I love that inspiration, and that was the whole thing with this book that I'm writing. It's like these kids are out there living life and doing things. You're in Costa Rica and you're off the grid. Like,
Oh yeah.
that's so awesome.
I've done it all. I went skydiving in Italy.
Good
I've,
for you.
done just by you never want your adventure and life adventure to stop because of diabetes, and it doesn't have to. And as an adult, when they become more autonomous, my whole belief is like when their numbers are and they are taking, ownership of their diabetes
Right.
and their numbers are more in range, they just feel better
Mhm.
to do all of those things with more energy, more focus, and more like zest for life. So
Yes.
if you can just set them up for success up until that point of like, hey, once we pass the baton off, this is your thing and it's not your thing to ignore. It's not your thing that has to intrude in your life, but it is something that like you do have to stay on top of because it's going to, doing that is going to allow you to do anything that you want in your life. Like that, to
Exactly.
me is the best thing. But
Yeah.
Erin, can you please share where people can find your books, more about
Sure.
you? Would love for you to plug that.
I'll even show you a picture of one of them. Of course, a whole bunch of them are lost. This is my note copy. I've got all kinds of things in there, but this is my copy. So it's Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Goodreads. There's a whole bunch of places you can find it. Um, and I'll actually be in Toledo for anyone in the Toledo area. October 14th, we'll be doing a book fair and I'll be doing a book signing. And so there's 3 books out in the series right now in this one. And the third one is a mystery, which was a lot of fun to write. I've never written a mystery, so I love that.
Oh,
Yeah, so and in the back of each one, I'm learning as I go, but there's links to all the other books you can find. This is the kids series, but of course the mom's book also, which is the nonfiction. It will link to that too. I try to do something for both. For like you said, we got to take care of the moms and the kiddos at the same time. So
of course. Well, congratulations. The cover art looks beautiful. That's a
thank you.
beautifully well designed book, and I'm sure the inside is even better. For everyone listening who is not watching on YouTube, we will put the links to where you can get all the books in the show notes below. So if you're a parent, with a child that has type 1, this is a great thing that you can include into bedtime routine. But also, I want to encourage everyone too. a lot of times, schools would love to have something like this in their library. So I'd imagine if you brought that to your library, they would, your child's library at school, that would be a great addition to the collection. So,
Absolutely.
alrighty, Erin, thank you so much for sharing your story and your rise with us, and we'll catch you soon.
All right. Thanks so much.
Bye.
All right. Take care.
Thank you so much for being here with me today and listening to this episode of Reclaim Your Rise. To let us know that the episodes we're putting out are impactful, and to help us get our street cred up and let everyone else know that this is something worthy of their time to listen to, please leave a rating and review on our Apple Podcast, send the show to other people impacted by T1D or maybe even your doctor, and share it on social media tagging at Risley Health and at Lauren_Bongiorno. New episodes of Reclaim Your Rise come out every single Tuesday, so make sure you are subscribed to the podcast so that you never miss a beat. Thanks again for listening, and as always, remember, diabetes is a challenge that we did not choose, but one that we can rise above.